Hey there, YouTubers. You're watching Session Report, the show that brings you to the gamer's table to share in the surprises that come up during play. I, of course, am Kitten Hoarder, and today's Session Report I am going to be playing, you guessed it, Pandemic Legacy Season 1. As I mentioned in a previous video, I'm going to be recording every minute of my experience with Pandemic Legacy, from the minute I begin my first mission until the minute I end my final game. So prepare yourself for upwards of 48 hours, I would assume, of footage. Maybe 24 to 36 would be more accurate. In any case, though, I'm going to be starting my first play of Pandemic Legacy. I have not played this game at all yet. In fact, I have never played a physical version of Pandemic, but I've played quite a bit of Pandemic on the app, which again is a high quality app, one of the better board game apps available. So hopefully I don't stumble too much over the rules as I attempt to implement them myself, and let's see how the game plays. Okay, people, this is Pandemic Legacy. So, like I said before, I have barely touched the game. I've read through the rules, just to refamiliarize myself with it. I'm pretty familiar with the base game of Pandemic, but like I said previously, I've never actually played the physical version. I've got the game mostly set up, but there's a few steps that I still have to do because I wanted to make sure to share those steps with you. I have not yet looked at the first of these legacy cards, and yeah, so let's talk. First of all, as you can see, this is a map of the world. If you're not familiar with the idea behind the base game of Pandemic, there are 4 different viruses that are sort of ravaging the world's population in this mass pandemic. You play as a team of researchers and doctors and other specialists who are trying to eradicate these viruses from the world. You win the game if you cure all 4 viruses. You do this by gathering these city cards. Viruses come in 4 colors. If you have 5 cards of the same color as the virus, and you are in one of these research stations, which is what this building here is, you can discard the 5 cards and you've cured that virus. Now, that's not the end of the game. You need to cure all 4 viruses, and just curing a single virus doesn't actually have much of an effect. It does make the virus slightly easier to treat when you go to a city that is being affected by the virus. But in general, it's still a threat. And that's because at the end of every turn, you draw multiple of these infection cards. It starts out at 2, but as the pandemic spreads, the infection rate increases to a maximum of 4. So, drawing a few of these infection cards, you see cities that will be infected by the virus. So, each of these cities drawn, you put out a cube matching the virus's color. So, in this case, it would be in Ho Chi Minh City and Osaka, Japan. That contributes to the further spread of the virus. This continues to happen even after you've cured the virus. The only difference being that if there are multiple cubes of a virus in a city, when you go to treat the virus, if it's cured, you can get rid of all of them. If it's not cured, you can only get rid of 1 at a time. However, if you manage to clear the board of all of a specific color of virus, after that virus has been cured, then you have eradicated the virus. And when you've eradicated a virus, that means it is unable to be placed on the board anymore. If it's card comes up during an infection. Like I mentioned, the overall goal of the game is to cure the 4 viruses. That's regular Pandemic in any case. Pandemic Legacy, there are unknown goals. I don't know exactly what the objective is going to be for the first game. I imagine it'll be pretty similar. But as the months progress, this is a year-long sort of campaign. As the months progress, I'll be getting additional objectives, possibly alternate objectives, and I might have to fulfill multiple objectives in order to win the game. In any case, back to sort of the basics of the game. It starts out with viruses, cubes sort of spread out across the board. On your turn, you can move to adjacent cities connected by these white lines. You can treat viruses by moving to the city matching the virus and picking up one of the cubes. And those are really the main actions. There are 2 additional modes of movement that are very important, though. One is called a direct flight. And direct flight is, if you have a card matching the city that you want to go to, discard this card, and you can move directly to that city from anywhere on the board. You can also have a charter flight. It's the same thing, except you're starting at a city that you have a card matching. Discard that city's card, and you can have a charter flight anywhere to the board from that city. The problem is, as I mentioned before, you're trying to collect 5 of a specific color of card, so discarding them too often to move around the board is not really to your benefit. The other thing that you can do on your turn, there's really only one additional action. The various forms of movement. Oh, you can also move from a research station, which right now there's only 1 on the board, but there will be more later, to any other research station directly for an action. The one other action you can do is to give or receive a card matching the city that you are in, as long as the person holding the card is also in that city. So, as an example, say the black and the white player meet up in Seoul. Whoever is holding the card can give the card to another player, and that costs an action of whoever's turn it happens to be. You can give or receive the card for an action, but it has to match the city that you're in, which is actually a big restriction. So a major part of the game is trying to maneuver around the board to get these cards, which represent sort of like the research of the disease, to get these cards to the people who need them. So you can collect 5 of a single color and then discard those to cure the diseases. It's a very difficult game. I'm sure there will be some things added in to moderate the difficulty because of this legacy version of the game. But in general, very difficult game. I usually win roughly 1 in 8 times. And there are multiple ways you can lose the game. One way you can lose the game is if, say, you're placing these various disease cubes across the board, and you draw an infection card matching a city that already has 3 cubes of that disease. If that happens, that city experiences an outbreak. Instead of placing an additional cube here, you move this outbreak track up 1 and place a cube of that color in every city connected to this city via a white line. That can cause a chain reaction of outbreaks, in which case if this already had 3, I would then be placing cubes here that would chain react to there, and pretty soon I've caused quite a few outbreaks. Now, just placing the cubes themselves is not going to be terribly harmful to me. It's mainly moving up this outbreak track. When you reach the skull on the outbreak track, you lose the game. Another way to lose the game is if you run out of cards to draw. So that's another reason you don't really want to be spending these cards too often to move around the board. You need to play it smartly, because there's one card for each city in the game. Only one card for each city. So if you run out of the cards, say you have not played very smartly and you only have 4 blue cards left in the deck and you haven't cured the blue disease, you're screwed, basically. So if you reach the end of this draw pile and you still haven't won, you lose the game. And the final way to lose the game is if you would need to place a cube of a specific color matching one of these diseases, and all of those cubes are already out on the board, you lose. That way, the world has sort of become overrun by this disease, and there's nothing you can do anymore to stop it. So, that's the basic game of Pandemic. The cool thing about Pandemic Legacy is they've added, on top of this already very good basic game, all sorts of layers of sort of permanent effects that occur as you play the game. So, an example of this is, after the end of each game, win or lose, you get to pick 2 upgrades. And here is a giant page of stickers that you're going to place directly on the board and on the cards. And most of these are upgrades. The top are upgrades, the bottom are bad things. So, for instance, I could have a character who starts out with certain abilities, but due to upgrades that are placed throughout the game, after each game, they can gain additional abilities. If I've eradicated a disease, I can add positive mutations to that disease at the end of the game. So that's another reason to work on eradicating the disease, not just curing it. Now, in a normal game of Pandemic, eradicating a disease is usually a losing battle. It's very time-consuming to actually completely eradicate the disease, and although it does have a very positive effect during the game, by the time you're done doing it, there aren't enough turns left in the game for it to really matter. But here, I'm much more tempted to eradicate these diseases so that I can use these positive mutations for further games. I can take one of these city cards in the game, and I can turn it into an unfunded event, which makes it able to be used for a special ability in addition to the abilities that I've already mentioned that are tied to cities. And finally, I can, if I've placed a research station on the board during the game, I can put a sticker on the board next to that area that indicates a starting research station. So I can start with extra research stations on the board. So every time you play, you get these things that make the game a little easier. Of course, also throughout the campaign, they're going to be layering on additional rules and additional things that make the game harder. Some of these things can be if you happen to be in a city when there's an outbreak, your character gets a scar. So you can see there's places here for upgrades, relationships, which I don't quite know what they are yet, but I'm sure they'll be explained, and scars. You can have up to 2 scars, and you get to pick which scar you get, but you have to pick a scar. If you've already got 2 scars and you get an additional scar, your character is lost. You actually have to rip up this card. It can no longer be used to the game, and basically this character is dead. For the rest of the game that you are currently playing, that character is replaced by a civilian who has no special abilities whatsoever. In future games, you would replace them with a different character. There are 5 characters available right now. So as I play, I am hoping to not get scars, because then I would have to lose these characters. In addition, every time a city outbreaks, you add panic to it. First level of panic does nothing, but as panic builds up in a city, it starts rioting, where you can no longer put research stations there. Collapsing makes it very difficult to enter the city, and finally fallen cities are much more difficult to enter. And I believe if you are in a city when it falls, you also immediately, your character becomes lost. So all sorts of things like that, but that's not all. There's this deck of legacy cards, and as I play the game, I'm going to be drawing these cards one by one. only when it says that I should. This says to draw it when I start my first game. So I'm going to be doing this during this playthrough. So these are going to add additional cards or rules to the game. But that's not all. In addition to that, there are these dossiers, right? And they are numbered 1 through something like 47. And I will open these doors. It's like an advent calendar, like an advent calendar you might get for Christmas. I will open these doors when the game instructs me to, and it might have something underneath. Maybe a new sticker, maybe a new card, maybe just a little bit of text explaining something. So that's another set of surprises. And in addition to that, there are these boxes. And these boxes, again, I will be instructed on when to open them. But these have more stuff in them. Some of them are pretty lightweight. That one is almost weightless. Some of them feel like they might have extra components, like plastic pieces in them. This one is a special one I will open if I lose 4 games in a row. Now, on the subject of winning and losing, there's this sort of self-balancing mechanism to the game, which I am very happy for because I like a challenge, but I don't like to be crushed by a game. So if you lose a game, you play that sort of mission again. The game's broken down into a full year, January through December, and if you lose January, you play January again. If you lose again after that, you have to move on. But you get to play each month of the game up to twice if you lose the first time. When you lose the first time, you still get these 2 upgrades. So the more you lose the game, the more positive upgrades you get before you start ramping up the difficulty with further months. In addition, when you lose the game, your funding goes up, and funding is tied to these events. In a normal game of Pandemic, you just mix a set number of these in. But in Pandemic Legacy, the amount of events you mix in to the player draw deck is equal to your funding. If you lose a game, funding increases. If you win a game, funding decreases. So the better you're doing, the fewer of these events you get to put in. The worse you're doing, the more of the events you get to play with. And there may even be additional positives and negatives that are tied to winning and losing the game. I don't know yet. I don't know. Like I said, this is all completely new to me, but I'm definitely excited to start giving it a try. So, in just a minute here, I'm going to explain a couple more things, and then I'm going to stop the camera for a minute, and I'm going to basically sort of cut this so that there's one video that sort of explains the basic overview, then a separate video will get into the initial play of the game. But I want to explain one more thing first. So, I have these characters. Now, I mentioned things that happen that permanently affect the game. The first one has already happened even before I start playing, and that is that I've named each of the characters. I wasn't feeling terribly creative, so I came up with some familiar names to me. If you're a video gamer, you might recognize some of these. So these are the characters I have. First of all, there's 4 pawns, but 5 characters, so I'm only using 4 characters in this game. First one is Naomi Hunter. She's the scientist. So her special ability, she only needs 4 cards of the same color to discover a cure, instead of 5 cards. I'm not going to be using her this game because as cool as that ability is, I've found that the dispatcher, the researcher, and the medic are super crucial to winning the game, in the games that I've played. The generalist is actually possibly the weakest character, certainly the blandest character, but she has room for up to 4 upgrades. You can only upgrade a character if you played them in that game. So my plan, starting out, is to try to play with the generalist as often as I can to build up those 4 upgrades so that she'll become sort of a super character. Her name is Ellen Ripley because I'm hoping she's going to be a survivor. Lucy Quo is my researcher. She may give any one city card when she shares knowledge. That's when you're doing it on your turn or someone else's turn, as long as it comes from her hand. And that's cool because, like I mentioned, normally you have to be in the city matching the card. She breaks that rule. That's why I find that she's sort of crucial to winning the game, because you really need to be able to pass the cards to the people who need them, and being able to do that without the hassle of moving all over the board is really, really good. Derek Stiles is the medic. When he treats a disease, instead of removing one cube, he can remove all the cubes in that space. That's the same as what you would normally do if the disease is cured. So he gets an additional ability when the disease is cured. When the disease is cured, any space that he's in that has cubes of that disease that's been cured, automatically the cubes are removed. He doesn't have to spend an action to do it. So he's really good at walking around the board and eradicating those diseases after they've been cured. So I'm hoping he's going to be able to do an eradication this game, so that I'll be able to put a positive mutation on that disease. So he's my medic, and he's Derek Stiles, the man with the healing touch. Finally, I have the dispatcher. The dispatcher's ability is basically getting people from one place to another. On his turn, he can move anybody, not just his own pawn. And he can move any pawn to a space another pawn is standing in. So he is also really good at setting up those exchanges of cards that the researcher is also sort of skilled at that. He's good at getting people to the cities so they can pass the cards matching the cities. Both of them are very, very good. His name is Sid Highwind, because Sid Highwind being the ultimate transporter, right? The ultimate hero of getting people where they need to be. Alright, so those are my 4 characters. When I restart the video, I'm going to finish the setup for the initial game, and we're going to get started. Okay, we're back with Pandemic Legacy. January, first game. So, first thing I'm going to do is get sort of the final setup of the game. So I'm going to follow the steps here just to make sure I don't miss anything. And so let's get started. First, read the mission briefing. So let's do that. Read this just before I set up my first game. Alright, January, mission briefing. You know the drill. We've got 4 viruses causing us problems. They seem to be mutating faster than usual. We have someone looking into that. For now, keep it under control, as one of them may grow beyond our capabilities. That's interesting. Keep drawing. My objective is on the other side of this card. Alright. Objective. Cure diseases of the 4 colors. Okay, that sounds pretty self-explanatory. I've read this, gotten to this card that says stop, so I'm going to stop. And it says put the reminder token on the 3rd space of the infection rate track. So I'm going to take this purple reminder token and put it here. 1, 2, 3. Draw this card as soon as the 2nd epidemic card has been completely resolved, or at the end of the game if I win or lose before I draw the 2nd epidemic. So something's going to happen when the 2nd epidemic card is drawn. I didn't really explain the epidemic cards, so I will explain that when I put them in the deck. Alright, next thing, set out the board in pieces. I've already set that up. Next thing, place outbreaks, cure markers, and objectives. Did that. Place the infection rate marker and infect 9 cities. So I will now go to doing that. So infecting the 9 cities, pretty easy. Flip this over, infect a city. Flip the next one over, infect a city. So the first 3 get 3 disease cubes. So that is Mexico City. 3 disease cubes there. Sydney, Australia. That, if I remember correctly, is right here in the corner of the board. Madrid, Spain. Uh, wow. Oh, that's why it's blue, not black. I was feeling very foolish for a second. You can tell I'm not great when it comes to geography. Alright, now I'm going to do the next three with 2 disease cubes. Sao Paulo, Brazil. That is the capital, I think. No, 2 cubes on that one. Taipei, Taiwan. Alright, that's going to be somewhere around here. And Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. So that's going to be right there. Okay. Final 3 get 1 cube each. Tehran, Iran. Come on, come on. Where's Iran? There it is. Washington. That's the District of Columbia, Washington. Whoop. 1 cube. 1 cube. I'm messing up already, but you'll keep a good eye on me, right, viewers? Alright. And Hong Kong in the People's Republic of China. Where is Hong Kong? There we go. Okay. So those are the first 9 infections. So that way we have something to do as we start the game. And you can sort of see red is much more of a threat at this point than any of the other colors, because there's 3 red cities, everything else has 2 infected cities. So, continuing on. Select the funded events, add them to the deck, and deal out the player cards. So here's where I decide which events are going in the deck. I get to select 4 of them because my funding at this stage is 4. Okay. This one's new to me. I've not seen this card before. I'm going to go ahead with Resilient Population and Government Grant because I love those cards. Government Grant lets me add a research station to any city on the board. Remember, research stations, aside from being needed to cure the disease, you can move directly from one research station to another. So that would be a good thing to have as early in the game as possible, getting out those research stations. The Resilient Population lets me remove one of these cards from the game. So if there's been an epidemic, which I'll explain in a second, and I really am nervous about a certain area of the board that has a chance for multiple outbreaks, I can remove that 1 card from the game, and it definitely won't be infected. I'm going to take 1 Quiet Night, where I get to skip the infection step, and I'm going to... I think I'm going to go for Borrowed Time, which... No, you know what? I'm going to go for this new one, Flexible Aid Package. Let's just give it a shot. So those are my 4 events. Shuffle these into this deck and then give everybody their starting hand. We're dealing with 4 players, 4 characters in any case. So this is going to have a starting hand of 4. No, starting hand of 2. What am I saying? Starting hand of 2 per character. By the way, you may have noticed this, you may not have. I rewrote these names because I was noticing during the last video that the ink was a little smeary on the pen I was using. I went ahead and covered it with a Sharpie permanent marker, so hopefully that'll dry better and not smear, because I really would not like to be smearing ink on the cards, even though this is meant to be a legacy game where you make permanent changes. I want them to be the changes that I'm meant to be making. So, give everybody their starting 2 cards. Well, right away, Ellen got an event. Lucy got 2 cards here. Derek Stiles got 2 cards here, and Sid gets 2 cards there. Alright. There's a maximum hand size. I'm not quite sure what it is actually, so I'll have to check that. Alright, put these back. Prepare the player deck. So the rest of the cards I'm going to put into 5 face-down piles, and shuffle one of these into each pile. That's sort of the timer of the game. When one of these gets shown, this increases and other bad things happen. So we'll get to that when it actually comes up. I want them to be equal piles, so I'm just gonna very quickly deal out okay, and then shuffle an epidemic card into each one. And hopefully my quick shuffle is efficient and I don't actually get an epidemic at the very beginning of the game. That would be bad. And then I think it's about time to start playing after that. So the reason for breaking this down into 5 piles and then shuffling in the epidemic cards, if you haven't realized, is so that they don't get all clumped together. There's a natural sort of pace to the game. An epidemic comes out roughly every 1/5 of the way through the deck. And shuffle this one more time and begin. Okay. So, let me just check here, make sure I've done all of the steps. Have each player select a character and player color, blah blah blah. And we will start the game in Atlanta, in the CDC headquarters, I presume it's meant to be. And if I got a bonus from a previous game, I would get that now, but now I just start. Alright, so first thing I'm going to be doing, actually I will put that over here just in case I need to consult it. I'm going to take these cards, shuffle them up, and randomly select a starting pawn, which will be blue. Okay, so I have that attached to Sid. I'm trying to sort of base the colors generally on the colors that are used in the app, although these are going to be slightly different since the roles are not exactly the same as the ones matching the colors every time. Anyway, Sid's going to be the first player, so I will now begin. Every player gets 4 actions. And looking at Sid, he's got a card for Atlanta, so he could actually move anywhere he wants on the board. He also, remember, is the one who can move other players to his location. Nobody else has any blue cards, so it wouldn't be very good use of his abilities to have him give that Atlanta card to anybody right now. So I think what I might want to do is start out by giving this Kolkata card to Derek, who also has a black card. So where is Kolkata? Or I could take the Karachi card from Derek. Either way, I can take this Atlanta card and discard it and move anywhere I want. So looks like the Kolkata is, well, that's closest to the red, which is sort of where Derek wants to be. So I think I'm going to go there and give the card to him. So, first off, discarding the Atlanta card, I'm going to take a charter flight to Kolkata. Woo! Okay. Then I'm going to use Sid's special ability to move Derek where I am. Third action is giving him this card. And for my fourth action, I am going to... well, I think I'm just going to move whoever's going to go next, which is going to be Ellen. And I think I'm going to move Ellen here to Miami. So Ellen is the brown pawn. I'm going to move Ellen down here. And those are my 4 actions, so that ends my turn. I then draw 2 cards and draw 2 infection cards. So 1, another black one, not very useful actually, and 2, Bangkok. Okay. And then draw 2 of these, and wow. Okay. Interesting. So Kolkata just became infected. And Essen, Germany, the site of the one of the most famous board game conventions in the world. The Essen, what is it called? Spiel something or other. I don't remember the actual name. People call it Essen Spiel, even though Essen is just sort of the place where it is held. In any case, that's the end of that turn. We'll now go to Ripley's turn. So she's already in Miami. Her special ability at the beginning of the game is she gets 5 actions rather than 4. She's going to go here, Mexico City, treat, 1, 2, 3, and she has Shanghai. So if she can get to Shanghai, she'll be able to use that either by passing it to somebody or by discarding it to build a research station there. I didn't mention that, but that's another option. So she's 1, 2, 3, 4, and from Los Angeles, she can go directly to Sydney. 5. Okay, so that's her turn. Santiago and an epidemic. Okay, so first thing that happens, this moves forward. Second thing that happens, take the bottom card of the infection deck and put 3 cubes on that city. That's Ho Chi Minh City. And then finally, intensify. This is the really tricky part of these epidemics. I will then take these cards that have already been discarded. Remember, these are the cities that already have cubes in them. And I'm going to shuffle these cards, only these cards, and put them on top of the infection deck. And that way, the next card I draw is guaranteed to be one of these cards. And in this way, the cities that have already been infected will continue to be the ones that are the most affected by the diseases, which is probably the cleverest thing about this game, and the reason why Matt Leacock, the designer, is such a household name when it comes to cooperative board games. Alright, so that was the second card. Now I'm going to... Alright, Mexico City. So another cube comes out here in Mexico City. And Hong Kong. Oh, thank goodness. Okay, nothing terrible has happened yet. Okay, so now we have Lucy Quo. What is Lucy going to do? So she has this Johannesburg card. That's not super useful right now. If she can get to Tokyo, which she can do pretty easily. That might be a good move. She could set up a research station there. Or she could simply work on treating the diseases. I think I am actually going to have her... No, she's going to go to Tokyo. So, 1, 2, from there to Tokyo, 3, and... is it really worth it to set up a research station in Tokyo? It's only 3 steps away from Atlanta, where the starting one is. Nah, I'm going to hold on to it for now. So I'm going to have her be in Tokyo. Actually, I'm going to have her stay in Tokyo, even though that's wasting an action, because I want her to be able... No, she can give a card to anybody. So I'm going to have her move down here to Osaka. That way, she's still near Tokyo if she needs it. Okay, cards for her. Taipei. I'm glad I held on to Tokyo. And Moscow. Okay. Infection step. Okay, this is our first outbreak then. Ho Chi Minh City. So instead of placing another cube there, one appears in Hong Kong, one appears in Manila, one appears in Jakarta, and one appears in Bangkok. And I'm going to go ahead and right now use this resilient population event. You can use the events at any time in the game. And I'm going to get rid of this Ho Chi Minh City because I can tell it's going to be a problem for me. So that was the first one. I moved the outbreaks track up and a new game condition because of legacy. When an outbreak occurs, I have to increase the panic level of that city. Luckily, nobody was in Ho Chi Minh City when the outbreak occurred, so nobody gets a scar. But I do have to make Ho Chi Minh City into an unstable city. Luckily, it won't get another outbreak this game because I've removed that card from the game for now. Okay. And then the second card, Taipei. Whew! Things are getting rough already for those red cubes. Luckily, the medic is on it. And with that, I'm just going to go straight into the medic's turn. Then I think at the end of this round, I'm going to take a pause from the filming. So, medic. Derek Stiles is going to move to Hong Kong. Treat all of these with his special ability. He doesn't need to worry about Ho Chi Minh City too much, so he's going to go to Taipei and treat. And from there, he can go down to Sydney if need be. Okay, so that was pretty straightforward. All right, he got a Jakarta card and Kinshasa. And that's probably a good time for me to check the hand limit. I believe it's 7 cards, but let me just check. Alright, drawing the 2 cards. What happens if there's an epidemic? Oh, come on now. Where does it talk about? Okay, under share knowledge. 7 cards. Maximum of 7 cards, not including events. Okay, so he's drawn his 2 cards, and we're going to go Sydney. Oh, damn. Already another outbreak has occurred. So raising the panic level in Sydney, and this red disease is out of control. And oh man, oh no, Ellen was in Sydney when the outbreak occurred. So let me finish resolving that part, but then unfortunately she gets a scar. because, let me just double check this rule, but I believe characters standing in an outbreaking city receive a scar. Alright, so how do scars work? I believe I get to choose my scar. Alright, choose an available scar and add it to your character's card. You must place a scar on a character that has no room for it. That character becomes lost. Well, luckily that hasn't happened yet, but my generalist, who I was hoping I'm building up into a super character, has already gotten a scar. So let's see. She can become an insomniac, reducing her hand size. Overcautious, discarding one extra card to cure disease. Fear of small planes, discarding a card to use the shuttle flight action. Shuttle flight, I believe, is moving from a research center to another. PTSD, lose an action if you start your turn in the region where you got this scar. Oh, that one's interesting. Huh. So if she starts her turn in Sydney, she'd lose an action. That might be the one I give her. She just doesn't want to go back to Sydney, but that's not so bad for her because she gets 5 actions. Discard a card every time you leave a city with 3 cubes of the same color. Germaphobe, discard a card if you have one when you enter a city with a research station. Definitely not that one. Intimidated, spend 1 additional action every time you treat disease in a city that is rioting, collapsing, or falling. Definitely not that one. Discard 1 charm every time an epidemic is... No, I'm going to go with PTSD. It makes sense for me. Alright, so first permanent change to the game, other than the writing of these names, and I guess the panic levels, is Ellen Ripley gets PTSD from being in Sydney when the outbreak of the red disease occurred. And I get to write the name of the region. Oh, no, that's not the city, that's the region. Ooh, the region here would be the Pacific Rim. Ooh, that's harsh. That would be all from Tokyo down to Sydney. Well, I've already put the card on, so I'm going to have to do that. Let me just double check that region is indeed Pacific Rim. 6 regions, each roughly equivalent to a continent. Darn, oh, that's tough. Okay. Well, can't go back now, so... Pacific Rim. Pac Rim. Oh, dear. Alright, hopefully I'll remember that for Ellen. Oh, that was bad. Oh, dear. And, actually, was that my first or second? Well, it can't have been my first, so I still have an additional card I need to draw. And I will review the footage just to make sure. But, I believe I still have to draw one more card. Sao Paulo, Brazil. Okay. The yellow region, or I guess the 2 regions where yellow is found, always bother me. It seems really difficult to get around there. I don't know if it's just because it's so spread out on the board, and it never seems to be an actual real threat of outbreaks. It's always the red that really seems to be the troublesome region for me. Sometimes the black, very seldom the blue, and never the yellow. So if I'm going to eradicate something, I'm hoping it's going to be in yellow so I just don't have to go there. I just don't really like it there for some reason. In any case, I'm going to take a break from filming now and check over the footage, make sure I've done everything right so far, and I will see you back in a little bit.